Reverend Jim Blake, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just advance, Jim, as we see fit.
Yes, sir.
And, so we're talking about a better together collaboration between UWH and UWM. Anything you want to speak to that before we tumble along?
I would just say, first of all, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you here today. Thank you, Shad, for the opportunity to participate in this presentation with you. It has been just a really powerful journey working with Shad since he took this position. And I would say his fresh eyes really brought us to this point, being able to do basically some of the same things we did this morning, which is set aside the history, set aside some of the old narratives, and really begin to, if we were to start over today, what would we do? How would we do it? What's possible? And his enthusiasm and fresh eyes and willingness to do that has brought us to what I think is maybe one of the most powerful and unique views of what's possible for the movement that I've seen in my 20 years of association with it. So I'm excited to be here, and I hope you'll be really excited about what we're going to present today.
Thank you, Jim. I'm flattered. And yeah, it really has been awesome working with Jim. I mean, Jim met with me before I even had the position. I was just blowing through town, and we sat down outside the coffee shop and just spitball ideas. And some of this was just being born, I think, in that conversation that we had there. All right. So we've been having these ongoing conversations about how we can work together to grow the unity movement jointly. So there's not friction in the process, but that we're flowing together in the process. And so we meet regularly, and we have these ongoing conversations, and anything that comes up on either side, we bring to the table. So I'll go ahead and just read the first one. Maybe you want to do the second one here. It says, as UWH and UWM work together to grow the unity movement, each organization is discerning its roles and responsibilities given the audiences each has.
Yeah, so let me just provide some commentary here. These are not optimized for presentation. They are very text heavy. Please don't get lost in reading the text. They're designed to be materials we'll share over and over, and they're going to be really detailed as we go through. So for those of you that are presentation editors, you're going to hate them. And for those of you that really like the details, they're going to be there, but try to stay with us, and you can go back and dig into the details a little bit later. So while creating one unity has been discussed for years, we are now focused on how each organization is uniquely situated to meet the needs of its audiences with strategies to grow them.
So we did have a lot of conversations about One Unity. I was on the board of trustees at the most recent effort of the One Unity. And I think there's 3 roughly formalized efforts for One Unity over time.
At least.
And so we had a lot of those conversations coming into it. Now those conversations, we had a lot of clarity come out of that, which is part of what we're addressing here.
Yeah, and I would just say, honestly, for those of you that are familiar with the term cosmic 2x4, it would seem like after 5 efforts to do this, and each time it not just coming easily and effortlessly, and you guys know how that flows in this movement and in your ministries. When a divine idea comes forth, and it's truly a divine idea, its doors start to open, people show up, right? And each time we've tried to explore this, it hasn't really happened that way. So that's what really caused us to really begin the dialogue and say, okay, what happened each of these times? Why didn't it come together? Is there a different path? And once you open that door to, is there a different path? Then the possibilities were endless. So it wasn't just a whim. We did have a lot of discussions and analysis of the historical efforts to do that, and the number of times that it was explored, and what may or may not have been successful each time.
So it says, some have said UWM and UWH have different messages, but both teach unity principles. Each organization meets people where they are at different levels of spiritual depth and engagement. More to come on this. All right.
That is a really profound message. So if you can just hold on to that, I'm hoping that as we move through this deck, you'll get some clarity on that, because that is a common narrative that we've heard. You're teaching completely different messages. No, we're really not. We're presenting the message in different ways, which I'm hoping by the end of this, you'll agree with.
Okay, and again, you will get the slide deck so you can go through these a little bit more detailed. So this kind of comes out of what, as I've been traveling, as Jim's been talking to different entities, recognize people don't necessarily know the differences between the two organizations that we have. On my side of the world, we have Unity Worldwide Ministries, formerly Association of Unity Churches, which hopefully you have more information now about that. We say we serve the field, which is the leadership, ministry boards, and leaders themselves. We're responsible for credentialing, Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute, and we work with the urban school and the international schools. Do employment support for our ministers and ministries. We support creation of new ministries, supplying ministry resources, hosting online webinars and trainings, hosting Unity People's Convention, Annual Summit, and the UWM Tech Conference.
And from our side, this property and this portion, as Shad covered this morning, found by the Fillmores, formerly Unity School of Christianity, serves audiences and the broader population, including many other faith traditions, from new seekers to those with strong spiritual foundation. Responsible for things like prayer through our prayer ministry, publishing through Daily Word and Unity magazine, blessing booklets and books, creating new spiritually focused books and products, offering on-site and online retreats and events, free resources for churches and prisons and hospitals through our outreach programs and our Message of Hope program, and finally, stewards and owners of this sacred property, including the hotel and Airbnbs and apartments and so on and so forth.
What I love about this is every time I've gone through this, and I know your team does this as well, people in the room go, I didn't know that. So some things we just take for granted everybody knows, not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I was going to mention this is not a comprehensive list. There's probably online people going, what about this?
Right.
I'm sure.
All right. This is you.
Okay, so one of the most common things I heard in my first tour with the Unity movement, and then when I came back, was how are we going to grow? How are we going to grow Unity? How are we going to grow the movement? And it's not just an easy answer. We don't have $1 billion that we can just throw at national marketing campaigns and buy Super Bowl commercials and things of that nature. And so we really had to start grassroots and ground up, and we'll talk about what that looks like today. But our growth strategy around that is called friend raising. And how I'll sum that up is our idea is to go and meet new people. So we have to go where people are, we have to meet them. And then once I meet them, then I have an opportunity to introduce them. So depending on where I meet them through the prayer ministry, or I meet them as a subscriber of Daily Word. Once I meet them, I then have the opportunity to extend and deepen that relationship by educating them on all the things that we do. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's been our whole model, is friend raising. And if you look back, the most recent data in 21 and 22, we added what we call, so our total number of active constituents. An active constituent for us is anyone who has performed any transaction within the last 24 months, whether that's a prayer request, a donation, buying a product, sending an email, subscribing to an email, any form of transaction, that's an active constituent. We have nearly 800,000 of those. And last year, we grew that number by 18,600. And so we'll talk about later in this presentation how we're doing that and how the two of us can work together to continue that sort of growth.
All right, on the UWM side of things, we grow by developing, equipping, and supporting our members and leader ministries. So for us, we've gotten very clear at UWM what we do. We do not exist as an organization really in and of itself to do anything other than to support you and your organizations. So if you are not thriving and growing through our efforts, then we're not doing our job. And that has given us a lot of clarity in the last 2 years as we bring things to the table and we say, does this directly support our leaders or ministries? And if it doesn't, then it's something we need to phase out and let go, or our students that will be eventually leaders in those ministries. So we do now have our total of ministries, which is 777, and that's including domestic and international ministries that we have verified. And we have 1,717 leaders actively working out there right now that we know about. So again, if you don't tell us you're there, we don't know you're there. All right. So this has been a real realization, and I'll let Jim talk a little bit more about this, talking about who do we serve? And that was a real eye-opening conversation we had together.
Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So this was some of the assumptions, and we just talked about that a little bit. So it was UWM in a silo of just ministries and us in a silo of all others. That's the paradigm we're here to talk about today. So then we did this research, and they are not the same as we previously thought. But the key that I think we've overlooked over and over and over again is the areas where they overlap. And so we want to talk about and focus on, from a strategic standpoint, those areas and how we can create some complementary efforts in that space. If that makes sense. So here's a great look at sort of the intersection of the audiences. And so when the leadership came together back in 2016 and we started talking about some of the strategies I've told you, one of the things we had to do was really begin to identify who are we serving? What do the audiences look like? And we're going to get into these descriptions because they are homemade as we move through this presentation. But you start at this level of the positivity crowd. I think we all know who that is, the Oprah crowd, if you will. Then you get a level deeper where you start talking about seekers who are looking now for tools and resources to deepen their spiritual journey. And then finally, this idea of what we call superfans. They know who we are, they know our structure, they go to a Unity church, and they may be subscribing to multiple products. And so to formally identify that, what we're talking about over there is the level of awareness and engagement they have. And so these are kind of the labels that we've created for that, and we'll talk about that as we go through. This superfan circle at the end, that's where we have a real opportunity for collaboration and where the most overlap occurs.
Yeah, and I talk about this as I travel about and I do the workshop. I talk with ministries, the idea that someone who's ready to engage with a group of people and talk about spiritual principles, specifically unity principles, is a special person, right? They are already either a super fan or on their way to becoming a super fan. To make that step, to not just research online at home or read something on their own, but to come together with another group of people, either a full ministry or spiritual center or a small group setting, that's a special person. And so that's where we really come in, and that's our segment for UWM.
Yeah, so I think this is important throughout all of this because this presentation is going to be data heavy. And we are engaging a lot of data analysts and a lot of surveys and a lot of data information. So the first thing that happens is people will start lobbing, you're too corporate. Where's the spirit? Where's your spiritual practice in all of this? And so I just want to make it clear. Both organizations are led by ministers. Both organizations have multiple ministers on the team. Every meeting is opened with prayer, likely closed with prayer. People are using principle in their business decision-making process. So these are spirit-led decisions. It's not all just data, even though it may look like that in a presentation like this. So just trust that we are leaning, both organizations, both leaders are leaning heavily into spiritual principle as we are moving through some of these ideas and discovering different ways to collaborate. Okay, so that leads me right into some market research we've done over the last half a dozen years. We use an organization called Proof, and we really wanted to understand, for us to, again, to begin friend raising and go find out where people were and to identify how we could best attract them. We certainly used our own file, which is over 1 million, and so we could look at trends and analysis of behavior in that. But we use this organization called Proof Positioning, and they basically have a special model that they use where they have an algorithm for understanding what resonates with people emotionally. And so that sort of resonates with who we are as a movement. So they were a good choice for us. And so we've got a lot of data from that we've been using, and we use it to guide our strategic direction, as well as even product decisions. So many of you, how many of you have seen the unapologetically inclusive shirts or logos or products, right? Those are really popular. That came directly out of this research. They brought us that phrase. So the folks that they interviewed, that's how they identified Unity, one of the ways they identified it. So if that's how people identify us, let's step into that. And we did, and you guys have seen the result of and some of the success of that very thing. So the marketing research has been very impactful from that perspective.
Okay, so UWM did do a lot of market research back when we were working on the branding. Some of you probably have read that in your branding manuals. We talked about our demographic and those things. So we have used that, and we've recognized that it is old. And what we've also recognized is that we haven't kept great data, as we somewhat showed earlier on, throughout time for us to do a really deep dive into our data. So we're trying to be more intentional about that now, getting better at collecting our current data, inviting you to give us more accurate data, the annual reports, so that we can start having a better better time understanding our constituents. So to help with this, Aaron and I have been doing a lot of traveling, because really the data exists in your ministries, and we're finding it through the conversations we have with the leaders, the congregants, the board members in your ministries themselves, to have a better understanding and pulse of what's happening in the movement on the ground in the actual ministries, because again, we are here to serve the ministries. So as we travel, we come back, we share what we've learned with the leadership team, and we shift a lot of things, what we're doing at UWM and with the board, and we get updates on where we're going. So we look at the data we had, we look at what we're learning today, and we're shifting according to what we see.
Okay. Next slide. So this goes to what we were speaking about earlier. As we learn more about our constituents, we're able to learn how to better serve both current and future, and understanding really the spiritual journeys that those we are serving take, and those that we are serve, the folks that those we are serving serve, what the journeys look like for those people as well. And so we understand that as people grow spiritually, the resources they desire from us change. And so the more ways they engage with us overall, the more deeply their lives are touched, and the more they become devoted to our movement. Okay, this is going to be fun. So strap in, get your seatbelts on. We're going to talk about what we have identified as a funnel. And what was cool is we were working on this funnel when Shad showed up, and he talked about that early conversation, and he was speaking in terms of a funnel without ever having seen the work that we've done, which is a clue. So we're going to talk about this funnel and how we've defined it in terms of the journey that seekers take, or that what we have discovered, the journey that they take through their spiritual development, in terms of what the data is telling us, right? We didn't go out and define, this isn't scientific in terms of, this is what the human does when they go on a spirit. It's not that. It's their journey with us, if that makes sense, and what we're learning from our stuff. So we have grouped it into the same major categories that we use on the website: discover, grow, and experience. And I think as we step through this, those phases will make sense to you. Okay, on the right side, this is the text heavy part, so those just breathe. On the right side, you see representation of each phase: discover, grow, and experience. And discover represents the top of the funnel. I'm going to these are broken down individually in subsequent slides, so you don't have to freak out and get your cameras out, try to take pictures and zoom in, because they're all going to be broken down in the coming slides. So they're going to represent this broad range of constituents, and I'll just cover a couple of things in each one. So at the top, remember, in Discover, we talked about the positivity crowd, right? So these are folks focused on positive thinking, mindfulness, intention setting. They may be supplementing their primary spiritual path with other spiritual resources. As you drop down into the grow level, these are spiritually focused people. Now they're looking for tools and resources. They're probably into some form of prayer and meditation at this point. They may follow Unity on social media. They may have heard of Unity Village or even a Unity church. And then finally, at the bottom, experience. These are the brand aware super fans that we talked about earlier. So these are very familiar folks that are very familiar with us and our teachings. They're seeking deep spiritual support. By this time, they're probably familiar with metaphysics and what that means, and how that relates to our message. And they're likely involved with a New Thought organization and a church locally in their community. You want to do this one?
So this goes to sort of what I was just talking about, the type of person that's ready to engage at a certain level. So some people might come into our organization to be exposed to our organization at one of these levels, or actually be moving through these levels in the organization itself. Does that make sense? So as they come engaged, you might come in at top and they might be growing into an experience phase later on. And that at the top, we're looking more generalized people, right? They're not quite ready for the complex ideas of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. We talk a lot about, the pronouns used in their writings, and that might come off offensive to someone. Well, if they've been in Unity for a while and they're more at the experiential stage, they probably understand the words that were used at that time. They have more of an understanding to that. So they're ready to read that stuff and not necessarily be triggered by it. So we recognize that you have different people ready for different phases of our message based on either how long they've been in Unity or where they are on their path.
And I would consider, so think about, so in my own journey, the book that really set me on fire on awareness and my true spiritual transformation was the Celestine Prophecy, which is largely about energy, and it really introduced me to the concepts of how the universe might work, and it does at least reflect some unity principle in it, in spaces. But it was my first introduction. So I'm just getting used to these concepts and opening my mind to them. If Shad had walked up and handed me Charles' atom smashing power of the mind, I would have been like, okay, this is too complex for me. You see what I'm saying? So I think we've all been through that evolution, and we can't lead with atom smashing power of the mind. We might be able to lead with daily word or some affirmation cards or just the idea of affirmations. And then begin to take them progressively deeper. And you've all seen it in your ministry. So this is probably pretty logical, but now we're trying to take it to a movement and organizational level, if that makes sense.
So this is just a little bit more about the positivity crowd. Most of it we've already talked about. They're new to Unity, curious, and looking for quick, free support in many ways, right? They're just noodling on the internet, looking around to see what's out there, see what's available. And they may or may not be spiritually focused. They're might just be inquisitive at this point.
Yeah, and so look, this is where I get in trouble, or we have gotten in trouble, and just received some feedback about some of the products we've rolled out in terms of affirmation cards and things of that nature that aren't Eric Butterworth and Charles Fillmore and Myrtle right out of the gate. In fact, you're going to see more affirmation type card decks come out. Heck, we've even toyed with the idea of a Unity principle tarot deck of some kind, because the people, those are our people. They just don't know they're our people yet. And so when we can meet them where they are with similar tools and resources that they're familiar with, and then begin to introduce them deeper and deeper to what spiritual principle can be in their lives, that's what creates the depth and the engagement in the relationship. Does this make sense to everybody? And so we're well aware that out of the gate, we're not presenting you with the Charles Fillmore deck of tarot cards. I mean, it's not that you can't do those two things together. But what I can tell you is that number that you saw, just think about that number I showed you earlier, 18,000 new constituents. Okay. Those people, wherever they were when we met them, they weren't quoting Charles and Myrtle yet. But I would bet in the next 12 to 24 months, they will be, and they'll begin to understand who we are and what we offer. I hope that makes sense to everyone.
And also, as they become more engaged in that process, more aware of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, I would say they're more likely to go start look for a community that is practicing those principles, teaching those principles, working on those principles together, which is part of them moving them through that funnel. And UWH has the resources and the positioning to throw that broad net out to areas where our ministries may not be relevant in that space. They can throw that broad net and start moving those people into a space where now they say, I would like to connect with others who are doing this work, and they're coming towards a ministry. So we go to the next grow phase.
Yep. So again, we're not going to spend time, a ton of time on each of these phases. Again, we're hoping you're getting the general concept here of what a constituent journey might look like. So these are the folks that are, again, familiar with our brand, spiritually focused, probably follow us on social media. We talk about the types of engagement, maybe a magazine subscription, and then you start to see at the engagement there in the center towards the bottom. Now they're, just as Shad just referred to, now they're starting to get ready to connect with like-minded Unity people. And they may start doing that through an online retreat, or they may come here for a retreat, or they may, as Shad said, call customer care or call UWM office and say, hey, is there a center near me? Or search the website for a center near them. So now we've met them, and now they're getting a little bit deeper and starting to begin to understand some of the core teachings in our principles.
Super fans.
Go ahead.
So now you're talking about people that understand what we've got going on, right? They're probably already ready to read Charles R. Myrtle book at this point in time. It's not going to sound totally insane to them. They have a foundation of understanding to read from where this makes sense. They could show up and hear a Unity talk, and they have a foundation of understanding to hear that talk from. So these people have some experience going into this. They're already involved in New Thought, whether it's Unity or CSL or another organization. They probably attend a Unity ministry regularly. If they're really engaged with Unity, they've probably already found a group in their area or a ministry to engage with. They want to go deeper in their spiritual practice, right? So at the very beginning, they're just sort of inquisitive about the world of spirituality, but down here, they have a spiritual practice and they want to go deeper in that. They may actually, so our super fans may actually want to start entering the path to credentialing, licensing, or ordination, to step into a leadership role in that process and become a teacher or a minister to start engaging the next generation of individuals in that same funnel.
Yeah, so I'm hoping, and if you, it's not covered here in detail, but go back through those slides, and on the right, you'll see our intentional creation of products and tools and resources for each of those areas to bring people deeper. And ultimately, like Shad said, to get them to a place where they're involved either in their local community with a ministry and or on the path to SEE classes or taking retreats or online education in any form. But that's ultimately our long-term goal. So we meet them where they are, and then we just help them grow. And then, as you can see, this is just clarifying our focuses. So on this slide, you'll see that we're largely focused from a strategic standpoint on the top two layers of the funnel, if you will. And I think if you go to the next slide, yeah, there you go, Shad.
So that's where UWM starts to engage really with the people that are now getting more familiar with Unity or becoming super fans in Unity. That's where we're going to focus our efforts and our attention, not to try to cast that broad net as well, but to really focus on those that are ready or considering engaging with other individuals, either online or in person, to take these principles deeper. Yeah, I think that's a general idea. So that we now have clarity what we do and how what we do works together. And that some individuals that are really engaged with Unity World Headquarters and what they have to offer are starting to make their way to engage with Unity Worldwide Ministries and what we have to offer. And obviously people in our ministries are going to be exposed to materials that Unity World Headquarters has to offer and be expanded and grow through all that. So it's a symbiotic relationship where we're working together, but we're recognizing where we put our energy because we serve different demographics.
Yeah, so if we try to bring this full circle, let's go back to Shad's earlier presentation where he talked about what Charles R. said. And now you can really start to begin to see, or at least we did, begin to see the insight in that. So his commentary was not the best way to do this is to be one organization. It's to, there's a whole lot happening over here and they need to focus and have their core competencies. And this group over here will stay here and do their core competencies. And so as the 10 times we've tried to come back together and it hasn't worked, I believe that's largely why, because they're two different audiences, two different functions. But the thing we haven't done is we've been so focused on trying to figure out how to combine everything back together is we've missed this overlap. And the real power is in, it doesn't matter how many organizations there are, how do we work together in this overlap to really make the intentionally get people from those top two layers of the funnel to the bottom two layers of the funnel. And that's what this whole thing between Shad and I is about, and where we're trying to go with this strategy is intentional work to determine what we can do together in that overlap to deepen people on their spiritual journey and specifically deepen it with the Unity movement. Does that make sense? Okay.
When we just think about in terms of resources, financial and energetic resources, where we put our energy, I think in the past, UWM would have thought about all that funnel is ours. So we're trying to reach out to every aspect of everyone. Once we now have this focus, we can really zero in on those people that we reach out to and how we reach out to them, and have a much more effective engagement financially and energetically with them, because we know exactly where they are in the funnel and how we're going to talk to them. And I believe UWH can do the same thing. I've seen what they've been working on. It's very clear and focused on who they're going out after, instead of just everyone. And then now we have the opportunity to do the same thing.
Okay, wipe your eyes, deep breath. This is going to get, this is going to be really data heavy here as well. Next couple of slides. So you've heard me talk about the constituent journey in normal business channels. It's called the customer journey. And so again, this is the idea of this journey that we've been talking about from the top of the funnel to the bottom. What's interesting about 2023 is now there are actually software platforms. Okay, so how many of you have been to a store online or whatever, and I know you've all done this. You've searched for something on Google. I want some new boots, and then you go to Facebook and boots start showing up on the right. And in some cases, it's creepy. You didn't even actually search. You just talked about it with Alexa in the room, and the next time, now you've got. So there are platforms designed to do that, and we want to be able to do that, not to the creepy level that we're all kind of experiencing, but wouldn't it be nice if I'm just getting into the second tier of the funnel, and I'm trying to learn about prosperity. And I read this really good booklet from Unity on prosperity. And so I'm searching on the website, and wouldn't it be nice that when you came, we knew who you were, and we had you might also be interested in, and we're showing prosperity tools and resources like the most recent prosperity kit. So we want to be able to do that, begin to use the technology to assist people in letting them know what we have available that may be of interest to them. Think about grief. I mean, how many of us have gone to a website? I need some help here. I need something on grief. Wouldn't it be nice if we were able to automatically provide some of those resources, even include them in an email response from a prayer request? So we're going to see us start to use these platforms to customize people's experience with Unity, and not in an overly commercial way, but in a more deeply personal way. And so we're about to invest this year in a platform that will do that, a new platform that will allow us to do that, where you can go in and define those customer journeys. And that will then help us actually do some intentional programming, if you will, between our two organizations, and making sure that all the people on journey with us are aware of maybe centers in their area. So now you can see where we might be able to take a zip code and say, hey, did you know? See where I'm going with this? Okay.
All good on that one?
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So this is more you. All your touch points.
You skipped yours.
Did I?
Yeah, why are you taking breaks in the middle of the thing?
Oh, this is mine. Oh, I was just going to sit down and watch them finish out. I've heard many times, and I thought myself as a minister, wouldn't it be great if UWM was doing promotion for the ministries themselves? I didn't have the resources of a minister at the time, the energy, the staff to do that. Wouldn't it be great if UWM could do that, if they had the resources? And so we've talked about that and worked on that, and we made our first step into that arena. The Christmas video that many of you probably saw, that was not an advertisement for UWM, it was an advertisement for your local ministry. And that video we did as a paid advertisement going out on YouTube and Facebook, and that we had the link go specifically to the Find a Unity community in your area. So it did no promotion of us, it was strictly to promote your ministries, hoping to push people to your ministry. We're going to have to analyze that, refine how we do it, and figure out how we'd get better at getting people to see it and move them towards you, because we're trying to find that, bottom tier of that funnel, reach out to those people that are ready to engage, the second and third tier of that funnel. They're ready to engage. They may not know it yet, but then they see something, they go, oh, there's Unity groups in my area. I would like to look into that. So if we can start doing targeted marketing and hitting those people, learning more about them, where they are, what they're looking for as they're looking for it, then we can try to use that as to push them towards the Find Unity community page. And then they find the resource in their area that is your ministry or group that's operating there. That's also part of us promoting Eric into this position, or having the position created in general, to give us some more intention, effort around that. So it's not just internal communication, it's external communication, so that he can work with his team to start analyzing the data from this last video and reworking the next one, which will probably be an Easter video or something like that. So we're going to try to center around the holidays where people are just generally looking for a church or an experience to have with someone else. And can we get in front of them early enough that they'd say, oh, okay, there's something happening at a Unity in my area. I didn't know that. So Eric's going to be working with his team on that effort on bettering our internal communication. Also, how do we communicate with these people out there that actually probably would be interested in what our ministries have to offer? And then how do we move them to those ministries themselves?
Okay, before I get into this, I just want to, this is a very, 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 very future item, but I'm going to share it with you so that you can see down the road where we're looking. So everything I've talked about in terms of the funnel and how we're trying to reach people in each layer of the funnel, I'm giving you the macro view of the work we're doing at the movement, right? How many of you have connected the dots that you're probably having that same sort of mix within your own ministries of where people are, right, in that funnel? And so hopefully long-term at some point, we'll be able to develop, I have no idea what it looks like, but the idea would be, how do we take what we're doing between us at this big macro level and recreate it at a micro level so that it can be just as effective in your ministries and give you the tools and resources to be able to do that so that you can reach the same broad audience that's sitting in your auditorium every Sunday. Does that make sense to everybody? It's a pretty complex idea. It's long-term, no idea how to get there, but that's kind of where we'd love to see this thing go. Okay, so marketing touch points. Why am I sharing this with you? So again, I refer back to, we can't do the $1 million Super Bowl commercials and all that stuff. So it's been grassroots. And so we're doing, the fundraising is happening across all of these touch points. And I won't bore you with them, but think of every social media site you can think of. It's up there. Email marketing, the telephone, audio and video content, our products, magazines, in-person events. These are all the entry points and touch points where we can meet people in that specific space and then begin to develop the relationship and have our folks go on a journey. So all of the other thing that's important is to note that part of the complexity with all of this is this bottom bullet. We are trying to interconnect and cross promote across all of those channels so that there's continuity and opportunity in each channel. I hope that makes sense. Next.
All right, so as I mentioned before, we have an internal and an external component to our communication efforts. And again, I'm not going to hit every single one, but we do have our various channels that we're using and will be using and fine tuning to get better at. Because we have done this in the past at UWM, but we're coming back to it again with a department that's going to be working on this. We're going to be fine tuning a lot of how we do this, trying things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work today, and then shifting and pivoting. So we do have these two different camps. We're going to be focusing on internally, how do we better communicate with you? Like Eric said, let you know what resources we have to offer. As I travel around, there's some people that don't even know the path exists, which is amazing to me. But if you don't know the path exists, then you clearly have no idea what's going on with us. And so, get them signed up on the path. But that also speaks that we need to have more touch points, more communications efforts with the ministries that can't just be the path, because that's clearly not getting to everybody. So how do we engage with those that are not getting the path or not interested in the path and do better about communicating to you? But then at the same time, how do we get better at communicating externally? Because there is an audience out there, I believe a huge audience looking for our ministries, whether they know it or not. And they just don't know they're there. And it's time to stop being the best kept secret. And we've all said that. So that second part is really going to be our effort to stop being the best kept secret as ministries out there and really start becoming a household name that people are going to know and go check out.
By the way, I don't buy into the best kept secret anymore. When you're adding 20,000 new people to your file and to your movement every year in some way, shape, or form, that's no longer a small, that's 4 years we've done that. So 80 to 100,000 people, we're no longer a secret. I think we can let that narrative go.
The worst kept secret.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so we're going to talk about some next steps. One of them is going to, I don't know, we're going to try to talk through it here, but it's going to be maybe controversial if we don't talk exactly about what we mean when we see it. So if you want to roll that out. Okay, and I'm gonna actually let Shad talk about that one when we get to it. Where is it? Oh, it's the third one. So if you start, then you'll have to do the third one too.
Well, why don't you start then I'll do the third one.
All right, so we are forming what we're calling a Better Together joint task force, and this is at the board level. And so one of the things we have found beneficial over these multiple journeys to try to come together is that we do better as a movement when our boards are in some form of communication. And so this Better Together task force gives us an opportunity to do that. But it also gives us an opportunity to talk about strategically, when necessary, how we implement the things that we've talked to you about today. It gives us an avenue and an outlet to do that. In the past, when we've tried to just come together, it's been around the focus of coming together. And then oftentimes the two boards would meet just for the sake of meeting on a regular basis. And there wasn't necessarily stuff to collab, and it just wasn't very productive. And so I'm appreciative for the maturation and evolution we've seen in the realization that we'll meet when we need to talk about strategic items that can actually make a difference in the work that we each do. So that task force has been created, and they've already got some things underway, which we'll talk about as we move across this slide.
All right. So the Better Together model is really our, we see as time to let the old One Unity concept go to bed and take a nap, sunset on it. As Jim mentioned, there's been many, many efforts for the traditional idea of getting the organizations to come together, the one organization. It has not ever come to fruition. It's been very consuming and energetically, financially, and time to make those efforts. And we, in our conversations, recognized we actually are better off as two organizations, as Charles R. recognized and the field department put together. And that really we've been fighting that in some ways every time we've made this effort to bring the organizations back together, instead of recognizing this happened for a reason, an intentioned reason. And we could celebrate that and actually work better together, as opposed to keep just focusing on how do we come back to one organization. And since we've had those conversations, it's brought about this, funnel, clarifying the funnel, all the things we've had, it's helped us move forward. It's so much clarity. It's made our meetings so much easier to approach what we're talking about and who does what. And so, so that's what we're doing right now. We're presenting this as the closure on that. And we're saying that because periodically we get asked what's happening with One Unity. And whether I'm traveling or Jim's doing whatever he's doing, we get asked that question, what's happening? Sometimes we're in the same meeting, we get asked that question. And it's really One Unity is better together now. We are embracing that we are two organizations with a third organization involved, and that works best for the health of the movement.
And when done right, you won't know there's two organizations. If we do this the way we think it can be done, it'll be so seamless you won't know as an average consumer or constituent. The challenge we have is when you do know, then we get to this third piece, which is appreciate the affirmative efforts to rename the organizations back when they did and rebrand them, and the aspirational aspect of making them both global and so forth. But the names are just simply too similar, appear to be. So one of the things we wanted to say is, how do we reduce the complexity and the confusion? Because there's no denying there's confusion, right? There's confusion in donations, there's confusion in naming. Heck, there's not a call I don't get on where I'm dealing with someone from the outside who doesn't say some form of Unity Worldwide Headquarters Ministry, and they can, they conflate the two together, and no fault of theirs. They're just too similar and too confusing. So, or at least we think that. So back to the data part and the task force. The task force has commissioned teams from each of our organizations to come together and work with Proof to discern and get some input around each of our names and how that relates to the functions that we perform, and provide us some guidance as to, is there a different way to consider this? Is it a change in names? Or should we, and I don't know if it's a change in names or a change. I don't know what it's going to be. And we didn't want to just say, we have to explain it to you. We have to say, we're considering a change in how we identify ourselves and one another in the movement. That may or may not be a name change. The data will tell us. And so this group, has gone out and has begun to start to research and get some reflection from those we serve on what we call ourselves in contrast to how we may show up in the world. I hope that makes sense. But hopefully we'll have some great data that will come back to this joint task force, which they can then review and make some decisions about how do we reduce confusion, whether it's in naming or some other way. Maybe it's a different way to brand and market, but the idea is to just reduce confusion. Does that make sense to everyone? What I don't want is the narrative to be, oh my God, they're changing their names and changing their brands. That's not what I said. We've commissioned a study, the task force, the board level task force commissioned a study to see if there's a way to be less confusing in how we identify ourselves. That's it. That's all that's been committed to at this point. When the data comes in and the task force reviews it and they have something to report, we certainly will. And I'm sorry for the big disclaimer, but you guys know how stuff travels really quickly in our movement, which is a blessing a lot of times, but we just want to make sure that the right thing is traveling in terms of information. Does that make sense to everyone? Security, can we please escort? The question from the floor was, are we changing our naming and our branding? And we have invited security to remove that person from the room. So no, we are not. We are, again, the idea is reduce confusion and be more clear in our identity that may show up as a name change. It could show up as different marketing efforts. We'll wait and see. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you read through our history, each organization has been referred to as headquarters at various times. So someone says headquarters and you have no idea who they're talking about. So that doesn't help.
Yeah, we thought the Unity World headquarters moniker was new with the 09 branding. Wasn't. You can go back and look at the press releases around the Activity Center, which we've done because we're looking up the history of the Activity Center because we're about to embark on turning that into a new event center. And in one of the press releases, Charles R. refers to this campus as Unity World headquarters, even back then in the late 60s, early 70s. And so that moniker has been around for a bit. So we'll see what the data provides. I'm excited. And I'm hoping you'll be excited, and we'll certainly share it as soon as we know something.
And finally, just the last column talks about each of us going to be working to clarify and get better at understanding our aspects of the funnel and how we reach to people in those various aspects.
Just a comment. Confusion, my mind goes to confusion. And when you say reduce confusion, I just go to confusion. So, and then the very next thing that Chad said was increase clarity. And so that's what my mind went, wait. So we're increasing clarity.
That's correct. That's better, actually. In the law of affirmation, that's a better way to say it. Increasing clarity.
Jim, what's this building on the screen? What's going on here?
Okay, so let me just say a couple of things. First of all, and I was probably being overly sensitive and saying, strap in and get ready for all this, but we've given you a pretty deep look behind the curtain, well into the weeds of some of the operations things that we're working on every single day, which I love the transparency that we're finally doing that and allowing you to see all the stuff that we're working on a regular basis. There's tons more that we'll be sharing going forward. Our HR teams communicate regularly. Our IT teams communicate back and forth regularly. So there's a number of ways. And this came up as an opportunity for us to yet again work together. So how many of you are familiar with the property on campus called the Arches? Okay. So for those of you who've been around a long time, you probably are. For those of you that haven't, it was the original home that was built by the founders back when after they first purchased this property. It was famous at the time for not having a kitchen because Myrtle didn't cook. And Mother lived in what is now the golf clubhouse next door, which was the original farmhouse. It had a kitchen, she cooked, and so they went over there for dinner. But the Arches was the original home, and it's where Myrtle did a whole ton of writing and meditating and praying. That home has been occupied by a UWH employee for 30 years. And so people haven't had the opportunity to experience that place and its energy and what it's like. Well, that person retired from the organization, which freed up that property. Now, it hasn't been updated in 30 years. So we've done a little bit of refreshing to it. So that people could begin to at least experience the property and go in and take a look around and even stay there if they wanted on occasion. But the idea is to basically, Shad and I would like to work together and work with the movement to create a fund that would reinvigorate this property, much like the Airbnbs, if any of you have stayed in the Airbnbs on campus. And then rather than rent it out to the general public, make it available as a resource for ministers and spiritual leaders. For those of you that have been around a really long time, you'll remember a concept, and I don't want this name to, I'm just going to use it as an example, but please don't call this that. Harmony House. It was a small house on campus for a love offering. Ministers could come and have a week-long retreat or a few days retreat in this house, silent retreats. And it was on a love offering basis. We want to recreate the spirit of that with this property called the Arches. Not Harmony House, the Arches, increasing clarity. And so this is a soft launch of that project. Shad and I have agreed there's enough going on with the activity center and some other things on campus and what he's got to focus on. The real earnest fundraising will start maybe later this year or early next, but we're giving you a soft launch so you can begin to think about this and plan for it if you want. And there's actually a webpage set up. If you look at the top there, the unity.org Arches. So if you're so inspired and moved and you want to give today, you got a place to do that. You can go right there to that URL and drop in your seed money for funding of this project we're doing together. You want to add anything?
Yeah, so we, Jim brought to this table that this is going to be an opportunity, that the building was open again. And then we thought it'd be great to have both of us have skin in the game, both to be invested in this and work on it together as a joint fundraising effort, because it would benefit both organizations. And to have our ministers be able to come retreat here, I think is a really powerful resource to have. So we're very excited about that opportunity. We would appreciate Jim and his team bringing that to us to be involved with. And again, we'll do a much bigger push later in the year, but just to get you guys a heads up of what's coming, and that we'll be fundraising for that. And so I'm excited to get inside of it and see it. I haven't seen it yet, so that'll be exciting.
Oh yeah, we should. I'll have Christina set you guys up with a tour. You can take your whole team down there if you want.
Okay. He wasn't gesturing to all of you, just to Jim.
I think that's the last slide.
It is.
So do we have Q&A next, or are we complete?
So who's on the Better Together task team? Those are representatives from each of the boards. Do you have a list of names from your team?
Well, I think we limited it. Did we say it was officers?
4.
So it's 4 from each board, and it's certainly the president and the vice chair. And then I think after that, it was by selection. But you can run through who's on yours, and I can run through who's on our side if you like.
Okay, we have Doris, Sylvia, Valerie, Jean Marie, and me. Right.
Yep. And for us, it's myself, Charlene Manuel, Sandra Campbell now. And I think that was it. We just had the 3.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
You-
sorry. Tanisha.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, she's one of our newest board members. Yes, she is on that committee as well. Tanisha Rowan Ferguson. If you don't know her, you should look her up. She's amazing.
All right, so it is open for Q&A based on everything you have seen thus far for Jim and myself.
Thank you. Very exciting things. I love seeing all these presentations. I have my normal question, 20 years later, same question. Music. Music is a resource. Music is often a way for people to discover our message. Music is a way to work together with the ministries to take the message home. I'd love to see a possibility of music showing up, or how that could happen, how I can help make that happen. I brought these questions up when I used to be the chair of the music team 20 years ago. And it may be under the drop down of resources. I don't know. It's just a, question. Thank you. Done happily and in love and integrity.
Received happily in love and integrity. So there's lots of elements that we're going to make the slide there as those general topics. We have youth and family ministry. We have our international departments, all these things that everyone has a passion about, interfaith, and different people have a very ignited passion around one specific topic of ministry, and all of them are powerful touch points. And we, as we understand our audience better, we'll have a better idea of how we use those touch points for those audiences. I believe music and production coupled together can be a very powerful, transformative experience. And you may not even need the sermon at that point because that can be so powerful and transformative. How can we do that better in a way that is really the way it can be done well? So yes, it didn't make, but we have to have those conversations. I appreciate you're on the board so we can have those conversations and bring them to light. Do you have anything you want to add?
I couldn't agree more. I think, I don't know that we were sophisticated enough back in the day, but I think today with this idea and the different touch points that we talked about, that screen with all the little squares on it, that there is an opportunity to bring music more to the top as just like a set of affirmation cards or intention dice. How do we elevate music? Because to your point, it is a universal language and it is very powerful. And so how can we incorporate that into the tools and resources that we're offering across all these different platforms and in what we're doing in the organization? So you've certainly spiked my curiosity in terms of how we might do that, because I think it is a really powerful medium. And so please don't lose that seed and push us to continue to do that. But yeah. So I'm going to take that back to the team as how do we do that? How do we elevate it and make, because I think it's across all the things, reading materials and books and booklets and prayer and tools and resources, it seems like an obvious missing component. So I applaud you for bringing that forward. Thank you.
More questions in the room, online? No, everyone's just totally content online. Oh, is this about focus versus?
So I just want to notice something that I think is so powerful. The funnel with the 3 sections and getting the engagement and seeing people move from seekers, see us moving from seekers to finders, right? And really deepening our engagement is so scripturally sound. In Matthew 7:7, we use this all the time. Ask and it shall be given unto you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you. And it goes hand in hand with you talking about the algorithms. I mean, I love that I can think the thought prosperity and have prosperity. Right now, it's just speak the word. I have to be much more careful about the words I get into conversation with people about, because it will show up on my phone and my computer. And I think the universe is saying these principles work, and it's being worked in our whole world in ways that, like algorithms, that people have not understand why, but that's principle. It's principle. So
that is fantastic.
Matthew 7:7.
Love it. Thank you.
The scriptural reference and everything.
That was good, wasn't it?
That was almost.
Marty has a
Hear that
question.
before you shut up?
Marty has a
Okay.
question online.
I want to support Sue Riley, who spoke and did not give her name, for her tremendous work that she and Richard and I'm sorry, the other gentleman in Florida whose name I can never remember, who started Empower in May. And the fact that it's the only really good music we have in Unity. Anybody who knows anything about hymnology knows that "O Wings of Song" hymnal is one of the poorest, in terms of hymnology, it's one of the poorest hymnals in existence. And when I needed to use hymns, I often went to Unitarian churches, church hymnal, and the Disciples of Christ hymnal, even the newer Methodist hymnals. We really need to do something about institutionalizing music that can be used in all Unity churches, so that we have a sound, sound use of positive, Unity thought in the music in all of our churches.
I also appreciate, I've had a conversation with Sue talking about, you can't just put good music onto a ministry and expect that it's going to happen. You have to have good musicians and good music directors in those ministries that can apply the good music. Even if UWM said, here's our new songbook, do this. That doesn't mean it's going to come off that great in the ministry if we haven't had a system for hiring great talent that can play those songs and music directors that can lead those songs and that sort of thing. So there's a whole system and process in place that we need to address, and a culture shift that actually has to happen with that, or could happen with that, create these opportunities. So the conversations are happening. That's what needs to happen, and the thoughts are thinking.
Well, I love the idea of recreating, don't, I hope she's okay, but a resource like the Wings of Song hymnal that has New Thought music that could be sung in every New Thought, especially Unity Church, just a movement-wide resource where we all have one songbook that we're moving from, I guess, consistency. I think, and Shad, you're doing a lot of that work already. So if there's any way we could help publish that or work with the New Thought musicians to create a canon of music that we would all identify as Unity or New Thought music, I'd love to support that if I could in any way.
Okay, we have one more question from online. Oh, hold on, we have a comment. This is Reverend Sylvia Sumter.
Thank you. I love where we're going with that. But can I just say one thing about the music, just to make sure that we're also culturally diverse, because we have New Thought music that would not necessarily fit into my congregation. They'd be looking at me like, oh. So we need to make sure that music is a language that touches all, but it still has to be culturally relevant for all.
Amen.
Okay, there's a question online. One last question. Robin Goff.
Oh, is that me? Okay, great. Thank you. So my ministry is not a traditional church. It's an alternative ministry, but we do a lot of in-person gathering here. But I just want to throw in that the things that I'm witnessing that are drawing people in are holistic healing, grief, suicide loss, massive stress from the past 4 or 5 years, and energy healing, talking energy, vibrational healing, that sort of thing. So just my 2 cents.
Healing's come up a lot lately as I've toured the country. I can remember just at least 3 distinct occasions where someone just said, when are we bringing back healing? When are we going to talk about healing again? And it's something that seems to be boiling to the surface. Not that it ever went away. It's always been a part of what we do, but it hasn't really been the forefront of our message. And my answer to when someone says that is, we can't bring it back until the Unity leaders themselves are ready to teach it with authenticity. I don't want to rush something out that's inauthentic, that we don't actually believe and agree on in Unity. We just say, oh, read this book, Myrtle did it, figure it out yourself. We're practicing it, we're doing it, we teach it from a place of authenticity. So that is on us to bring back healing, is to bring back healing into our personal lives. And I know many of us are doing that. I'm not saying that's not the case, but healing exists in an authentic place. And you're talking about energy and everything else. We, as the spiritual leaders, ministers of these organizations, these groups, we represent the embodiment of these principles. And if it's going to come back, we're going to be embodying these principles so people see it alive and real and relevant today as a part of that. And then as we talk about it, they're seeing it exemplified, and that's far more practical and impactful than just talking about it.
So everything Shad said, and we heard the same things, and we've heard this call a lot. And so, but this is the disconnect between what's happening sometimes here and what's going on in the field. So last year, in response to that very thing, the Fillmore Festival was entirely dedicated to healing. And every keynote speaker talked about their own experience of healing. They talked about the teachings. They talked about some of the current controversial things Shad mentioned. Do we still believe this? There was actually a whole panel on, do we still believe what Myrtle taught? about healing. And then also last year, we produced a booklet specifically on healing. So we are trying to work our way back into that, but I do think Shad has some great points in terms of we need to really figure out what are we going to teach on healing, create those resources, and then teach it and have our teachers teach it consistently so that we're all teaching the same thing. But we are trying to bring, from a resource perspective, we're trying to bring more of that back to the forefront with opportunities like the Fillmore Festival, the most recent booklet, and you're going to see us continue to have other resources. There's another one we just did recently, which is escaping me. Reverend Ellen would not be happy with me right now, but if I can dig that up, I'll get it out to the group maybe during tomorrow's set of meetings. But so I just want you to know we haven't abandoned it. We've heard these calls. We're trying to move in that direction, but I also think we have some work to do, as Reverend Shad said.
And also, when we talk about the education redesign, that's part of our conversation for the education redesign. Charles and Myrtle taught others how to heal themselves and how to heal other people. We, I feel, should be teaching that today, teaching our students how to heal themselves and how to heal other people in their congregations so that we can bring this authentic healing movement back into our ministries. And I know that I'm not saying that hasn't been taught historically in our schools, but the education redesign, we really want to make that applicable and palpable in the education process so that people come out of that healed of their situations as they are ordained and ready to heal others of their situations. So we keep that history going and alive, the healing ministry of the Fillmores, which is really why we exist in the first place. That's where it began, the healing ministry.